everyone, and welcome to episode 9 of Chicks and Sticks, brought to you by the Hockey Writers. My name is Melissa Boyd, and I'm once again joined by my partners in crime, Kristy Flannery, Hannah Garfield, and Mariah Holland. Hi, ladies. How are you doing tonight?
Hey, what's going on?
How are you?
Good. So if you're enjoying our show, make sure to drop us a like, a follow, or a comment from wherever you're watching or listening. And do send us in your questions if you have any, and we'll be sure to answer them in a future episode. This week, we're thrilled to welcome two of our THW colleagues, Gail Kauchak and Brooke Leferno, who both cover the Chicago Blackhawks, and our co-hosts of another one of our weekly shows at THW called Blackhawks Banter. And usually Gail has a Blackhawks Banter display behind her, but tonight she decided to forego it for our Chicks and Sticks episode. But thank you so much, ladies, for joining us. We're really excited to have you.
Yes, thanks for having us.
Before we jump in and start questioning you guys on the Blackhawks, I have to take 1 minute. We all have our drink of choice tonight. It is Thirsty Thursday here on the episode, and we got to go around. I want to know what everyone's drinking.
Okay,
Kristy, because I know you'll want the bottle.
Thank you. Yes, and yeah, thank you. I appreciate that.
I was hoping we would start with you, Mariah. I've got rum and Coke tonight.
Hannah, what do you have?
I have a Sauvignon Blanc.
And our guests?
Me too.
Red wine.
And I have rosé. Cheers, guys, to us, to Mel, and hopefully the Montreal Canadiens can win at least one game. Cheers.
Yes.
Just one. That's all we need.
It's all I want. Just one.
All right. So now we can get into the actual hockey discussion. So the best place to kind of start this week is with the latest news. And this was broke by Elliot Friedman the other day that Duncan Keith is potentially going to be traded to either a team in the Pacific Northwest or Western Canada. Were you ladies surprised to hear about his pending departure?
Do you want to start with me?
Go ahead, Brooke.
Okay. Yes and no. I was kind of surprised only because it seems like he's one player that would just kind of never leave, but then also not surprised because the future of the team is so uncertain, and maybe at this point, because he's older, he'd want to move on. So kind of yes and no, I would say.
I actually am extremely surprised. I thought that he loved it in Chicago and that he wanted to be a Blackhawk for life. It's my understanding, though, that he is maybe looking to be a little bit closer to his family, his 8-year-old son, Colton. I know that with the COVID restrictions, he really didn't get to see him at all last season because they couldn't cross the borders. So maybe that has something to do with it, or maybe, he's looking to go to a contender and make one more run for another cup before he retires.
So if he is traded, what do you expect for a return?
Not much, to be honest. I mean, that sounds really bad because, he's a Hall of Fame defenseman. But at this point, I'm probably thinking it's not going to be much. Maybe some draft picks, I would say. And honestly, if he wants to get moved that badly, it probably won't be a huge return. Plus, it's Stan Bowman we're talking about. He's not really good at this.
Well, I wasn't really even thinking so much about what the return would be, is kind of how it would impact the Blackhawks. And he has 2 years left on his contract, $5.5 million. So they're going to get a substantial amount of money off the books. And, then they could maybe reasonably pursue some big names in like Dougie Hamilton or Seth Jones. So that opens it up a little bit. And also with the expansion draft, they were going to have to protect Keith. And now they could protect another defenseman instead. So they could protect. They're going to go with 3 defensemen: Connor Murphy, Nikita Dazorov, and Riley Stillman, who are all defensemen. Well, we have our arguments, don't we, about Brooke, about Dazorov. But, it would be nice to have Stillman protected when he might not have been able to before.
Mm-hmm.
So Pacific Northwest, Western Canada. So that kind of limits the options, unfortunately, for the Blackhawks. But where do you see, which city do you see being, or the team do you see being the best fit for him?
Well, I did see Vancouver, And I thought, okay, that kind of makes sense. But I also actually thought of today that I do remember when the Blackhawks were playing in Calgary, that Keith's son was actually at one of the games. So I'm actually thinking maybe it could be there if it's closer to where his son lives actually too. But I definitely think it's going to be one of the Canadian teams, but I guess maybe Vancouver or Calgary.
That's interesting.
So, okay, so right, the Seattle Kraken, they were thinking might be an option. Vancouver Canucks, and gosh, why would he go there? Oh my gosh. No. They used to be such a huge rivalry for the Blackhawks.
Yeah.
It just seems so wild that Duncan Keith would go there, because that was when he was in his prime. Edmonton Oilers, you mentioned the Flames, and the Winnipeg Jets. I don't know why, and I don't really know. Who knows what's going on behind the scenes, but for some reason, I think he might go to like the Oilers or the Jets. I don't see him going to the Kraken. Maybe.
Watch, it will be the Kraken because we think it's going to be a Canadian team and it'll just be,
He would be a good name though for a new franchise. Like
it actually would. Yeah,
he would be a good.
Sure.
That would be a good fit. And in Vancouver, I feel like him like kind of mentoring Hughes would be pretty good too.
Yeah, I totally agree with that.
So with Chicago, there's another player we have to bring up, and that's Patrick Kane. He's 32. Do you see him retiring as a Blackhawk?
Do you know what? I want to say yes, but I'm kind of conflicted because during his exit interviews, he kind of mentioned he was getting sick of losing, and maybe as his contract's expiring, he would want to think about maybe moving on if the team doesn't start getting competitive. So all of me wants to say yes, but you know what? This guy deserves to win a cup and not have to deal with any of this. So
yeah,
does move on, I wouldn't be surprised. But also I would say even if he does, I could see him still retiring a Blackhawk, like him doing one last shift, like still retiring one either way.
Yeah.
I think he'll be a Blackhawk for life. We said the same thing about Keith, and now all of a sudden there's this that's going on. But he's probably Kane is probably a better fit for this rebuilding team than somebody like Keith, just because Kane, he's 32, but he plays the game at such an elite level, and many people are expecting him, to be able to play like this into his 40s, and he's always looking for opportunities to grow his game and to get better. So I think that he could embrace this whole rebuild. He could kind of be that elite veteran that kind of leads the way. And he, let's face it, he loves to play with these younger guys. And I think, he was great with Alex DeBrincat last couple seasons. Lucas Reichel's coming in, and it's said that Reichel probably sees the game the same way. And so I see him. I think he'll stay.
Well, plus Kane at 40 is really better than the whole roster. So you know what? That's what I'm worried about. We have to keep him for that reason.
I mean, he could have been a Hart candidate this year. He
could have. He was on a tear for a while. Yeah.
So he will be a UFA at the end of the 2022-23 season. What would you say his next contract looks like if he does, stay in Chicago?
I still think it'd be pretty significant because he is still one of the best players in the world, but he's pretty humble enough that I think he probably wouldn't command another $8 million contract. But I was actually thinking about like someone like Nicholas Hjalmarsson. When he re-signed with the Arizona Coyotes, it was like 2-year, $10 million. So I don't think it's going to be like another long-term contract, but I do see maybe a short-term like that, I think.
Yeah, I think I would agree. DeBrincat just signed a 3-year contract for $6.4 million. And as a matter of fact, that expires the same year that Kane will expire. He'll be 34. Kane will be. I see the same thing. Probably 2 or 3 years for like maybe $5 or $6 million each.
So we talked about how much of an elite player he is. Do you think it's an advantage for Chicago to have him on his team? Like, does that add more appeal for a player like Jack Eichel to sign with Chicago, knowing that he can play on a line with Patrick Kane?
Absolutely. I mean, I'm like so mad at the team right now that I'm like, do you know what? Do you look at this roster and does anyone else really fear you in a lot of ways? Like if you're a free agent, are you thinking you want to play with our fourth liners or anything? No, you want to play with Stanley Cup champions. You want to play with Kane and Taze and all those players. And I feel like if that's not an incentive, then I don't think the team itself, our coaching definitely isn't. Like there's not a whole lot there to be excited about, to be honest. So yeah, I do think that is an incentive. He needs to be here so we can get Jack Eichel for sure.
I feel like I'm like from a Devils perspective, I feel like I'm talking to like my soul sister because I say the same thing about New Jersey.
Yes, see, okay, we get each other.
We
yes,
get
we're
each other. I'm
totally
like, why would they were like, oh, Victor Arvidsson come to New Jersey. I'm like, why? What's he gonna do?
Exactly.
Well, I was going to say, normally Brooke is not this negative about her team on Blackhawks Banter, so I feel
I'm
like we're
usually
bringing
not.
out.
She needed a change of scenery.
Yeah, she's unfiltered
not
right
feeling it
now.
today.
So
It's pretty weird, Mel, too, to be able to like actually talk to you, like beyond, instead of having you behind the camera. It's awesome.
it's true.
Wait, I want to add something really quick about Eichel, though.
Mhm.
Obviously, I think a lot of players. I mean, everybody wants to play with Patrick Kane, right?
Yeah.
Mhm.
And I think that would intrigue Eichel to come, but I don't know that I would be wanting to sign Eichel. I mean, 10 million for the next 5 years. That's a pretty big chunk
Mm.
to bite off. So it would be totally cool to have like Kane and Eichel on the same line kind of thing. Both United States players, but I don't see it happening. And I think it would kind of make a stupid decision by the Blackhawks. They'd be going all in on one player when there's. That would be too smart.
Would you rather have a Jack Eichel or a Seth Jones?
Defense, Seth Jones.
Yeah.
Or Dougie Hamilton.
Yeah. Well, he probably would have a cheaper price tag, I would think, than Seth Jones.
Yeah.
I think Seth Jones is going to want to get paid.
Yeah.
That's true, but like I said, if you're going to throw the money out there, I'd much
Mhm.
rather have it be for a defenseman right now for the Blackhawks. I think that is their bigger need. Even though, yeah, sure, they could definitely use some center depth. And I think we're going to talk about Jonathan Toews here in a minute. It's all
We sure are.
right. It all depends upon how he comes back and everything. But
Yeah.
he is really comes back and has the center. Then maybe the depth is there.
Well, especially with probably losing Keith, now
Yeah.
that would be even more of a glaring need than it even was a couple days ago. Now it
Yeah.
truly is.
Well, I was thinking that may be the incentive behind them trying to move him, to move some money out so they can bring
Yeah.
somebody like Dougie Hamilton or Seth Jones in. I think that it would give them the flexibility.
You're going to see a lot of teams dumping contracts, or at least trying to.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we kind of touched upon him a little bit already. So let's switch gears and talk about Jonathan Toews. So he plans to return after dealing with chronic immune response syndrome this past year, which kept him off the ice for an entire season. How much do you think the Blackhawks missed him this season?
Too much, honestly. I feel like center depth was already an issue. And then when we lost Toews, he's such the backbone on the faceoff dot that it was so glaring and it was so hard. There was no one that could fill that top line spot. I mean, we kind of talked about Dylan Strome a little bit, but he kind of wasn't up to the task. And it just it made kind of it was just way too much of a red flag on this team. And yeah, it sucked. It sucked without him there. It just was not fun.
Well, they did horrible with the faceoffs without him. I mean, even he takes the majority of the faceoff. He wins the majority of the faceoffs. He's a great two-way player. He plays on the power play, plays on the penalty kill, and plus he's the captain of the team, and he's a good captain. I mean, let's face it. I think you guys are all going to agree that Jonathan Toews is incredibly well respected around the league. So
It's one of the
to
best.
have him not be there was really, really, really tough.
So what are your expectations of him next season? Are you expecting him to jump right into form? Do you think there's going to be bitter fans if he has, what do you think it's going to look like next season?
I think I don't want fans to get way too ahead of themselves and start like expecting way too much, because I don't think that's fair to him at all. I think even Toews, he's like Kane, even if he's not 100%, he's still a great player either way. But I'm going to treat this kind of like how you would treat the rookies. Just don't expect too much. Just see what happens and see where they end up. But I still expect that he'll be a good serviceable player either way.
Yeah, you definitely have to temper your expectations because he even said, he since he started playing hockey, he hasn't been away from the game and away from the ice this long. So it's going to take him some time to get up to speed. And this syndrome that he has, you don't really know. He still doesn't know how his body's going to react, and he could have a relapse. So that's tough. It's tough to say, but I honestly think that unless he's just an absolute shell of his former self, the Blackhawks are going to be better off with him around. Heck, just to have him in the dressing room.
Yeah.
I think that it's a positive, and we are really, really looking forward to it, aren't we, Brooke?
Yeah. It's really not fun trying to think of lineups without him in it. It's just not right. It's hard.
So by now, I think everyone's either heard or seen the video that was released with Taze and discussing everything that happened. Gail, do you think the timing of that video was a little suspicious?
I assume that you're referring to the Blackhawks scandal with the sexual assault accusations. And I'm just going to say, no, I don't think that it was, this was on Jonathan Taze's terms. He's been practicing. He's been in Chicago. When's a good time? When's a good time for it to come out, you know? And I don't think that it had anything to do with, we'll talk about Taze and then everybody's going to forget about this. Well, no, we're not going to forget about it. You know, it's not going to go away, and it shouldn't go away. They should do this investigation and figure out the guilty parties, and justice should be served. But this is a whole different story. Jonathan Taze is coming back. So let's not forget about it. We're not forgetting about it. But that's the negative story, and this is the positive story. And let's not intertwine the two. Let's be happy for the happy story.
Yeah, absolutely. That's very well said. We wanted you both to address it at least, and to not pretend like we were ignoring the issue. So I thank you, Gail, for doing that. So to recap this season, it was a bit of a roller coaster season for the Blackhawks. Started out really well, kind of faded at the end. But do you think overall they overachieved a little bit this season?
Yes, I do. And it was fun for that stretch because there were no expectations for them going into it. We kind of figured they would just be horse crap, and kind of like what our colleagues on Blackhawks Banter were saying before, they had a red hot power play, and that helped them be really hot for a while before that kind of came back down to earth and kind of where we expected them to be. So yes, I do think they overachieved. But you know what? It made it at least fun for a little bit instead of just all such dreary kindness.
See, I would disagree there. I don't think that they did overachieve. They did better than anybody expected, but I don't think that we should mistake that with overachieving. You know, there's a lot of young talent there, and I think that they did pretty, obviously they did pretty well. They did better than anybody expected, and there's just a lot of potential. And I think that they're going to be pretty good next year too. I'm excited.
The Central Division was really interesting because at one point, I mean, the top three were the top three. Like, we all knew who the top three teams were going to be, but it was really fun because at one point, Chicago, Columbus, Dallas, Nashville, like any of them could have had that fourth spot. Given when you looked at the schedule. So, I mean, Detroit was the only team that really didn't have a shot, but it was really fun to kind of watch because it really, at one point, it was wide open. It could have been anybody.
You're absolutely right. And it's kind of funny because I think, didn't we, Brooke, on Blackhawks Banter, we were predicting.
Yeah, we were.
Yeah.
I thought it was going to be the Columbus Blue Jackets. It was going to
me too.
Like those three.
No, they fell apart pretty quick at the end.
Yeah.
I know. And then like they just fell apart. And then, I was like, well, Nashville, no. And then you guys like made a run.
UC Soros is all I'm going to say.
Yeah. Yeah, he was something. Because I kept saying, oh my gosh, if we don't have Pekka, then we have a good chance of beating Nashville. And then we saw Saurus, and we're like, oh my gosh, we're gonna have a really hard time beating Nashville for a while.
What's that like to have a really awesome goalie?
Yeah, what is it like?
Feels pretty damn good, I'm not gonna lie.
Wait, who was the starting goaltender for Chicago this season?
We're not good with goaltenders here. We're really bad at it. We didn't even know who any of the backups were for like the final 4 teams. So
I don't think anyone really knew who our starting goaltender was. No one really kind of talked about it really, except Blackhawk fans, but mostly Kevin Lankinen took the majority of it. Yeah. Then Malcolm Subban, but mostly Lankinen.
Are you guys okay with that tandem?
No, not really. I like Lankinen a lot, but I don't really know if I'm kind of still deciding if he's a starter or not, because I feel like even if he's not, I think he'd be a really solid backup. But other than that, I feel like because we went from Crawford and Leonard to this, it was kind of such a shock to go from that kind of elite status to this. So obviously from that standpoint, I'm not satisfied with that. So I would like an upgrade at goalie, but like I said, it's not a knock on Lankinen because he did do a good job. It's just more like of uncertainty more than anything.
So of the of the goalies that are going to be at UFAs, who do you guys want?
Actually, when I was looking at the UFA list, because we did something like this on Blackhawks Banter, we talked about which kind of free agent would we like. And when I saw I can't pronounce his name on Florida. Is it Dreiger? Dreiger, yeah, I thought he'd be a good choice because he was pretty good when he was filling in for Bobrovsky there. So I thought maybe he'd be a good choice, but I'm sure a lot of teams want him. I'm sure. Maybe even Florida wants him.
I don't really know who it would be, but Lankinen started out Kevin Lankinen was a big surprise. Colin Delia was supposed to be the starter. That's who everybody thought it was going to be. And then Lankinen kind of came out of nowhere. And really good at the beginning of the season, but then he kind of came back down to earth at the end. But there's definitely some potential there, and I'm just interested to see how he does do with an 82 game season. Yeah. But with that being said, I think I would agree. For insurance and security purposes, I would love if they would add, like a cheap veteran guy that could kind of be goaltender that could kind of be insurance policy. To be honest with you, I don't know who that would be.
Exactly.
But I think it would be nice. Who knows if that's in the plans or if they'll be able to make that work, but it sure would be nice if it could.
But it also is concerning because what if Lankinen goes down or is injured? Then it feels like there's even less security there. So,
I was just thinking as you were talking that, so Yaroslav Halak is most likely not going to be re-signed by the Bruins, and he's been a great tandem for us the past couple of years, but I would hope that he lands somewhere great, but maybe Chicago's an option.
No offense.
No, I'm saying
the button there.
I love Hannah. I adore you.
Because the Bruins are most likely going to move on from him because they have Swayman. But Halak's awesome, so I would love to see him land someplace and have a good good rest of his career. So
give us Swayman then. I'll take him.
Exactly, but that's the thing. It's like it's got to be a situation like that, where they know that they're going to be moved on from their other team, but they probably would need to come here knowing that they are the backup and they are the mentor, because I think that they really do want to commit and invest in Kevin Lankinen.
Mm-hmm.
And this is really his year to kind of figure out if he's going to be a number one goaltender or not. So yeah, I agree. It would just have to be the right situation.
It would be like when Crawford was supposed to come and work with Blackwood until he decided like he was in New Jersey and was like, I'm out.
Yeah. That must have been a big punch in the teeth for that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was. It really was. You were like really excited. You thought that was actually going to be a really good tandem. Like there was one thing we didn't have to worry about was goaltending. And then Crawford's like, yeah, no, I decided we're just going to end it.
And I thought Blackwood was doing pretty good too. So I was like, okay, that actually might be a really good tandem.
Blackwood does not get enough credit for how good he is.
Exactly.
Like he has Swiss cheese in front of him for defense, and he's still a really good goaltender. Imagine him with like the Vegas Golden Knights defense in front of him.
Yeah.
He would be really insane. Good. Yeah, I will die on the mountain that Blackwood is like an amazing, amazing gooltender.
Who's the other goaltender? Blackwood.
Yeah, who is it?
Oh, I actually know this. This is the first time I actually knew who a backup was. We had Scott Wedgwood.
Oh, okay.
Who was good. He holds his own, but it's not Corey Crawford. So
yeah, understood. It's hard to replace him.
Many people are Corey Crawford.
True.
So pivoting a little bit, so to talk about coaching, do either of you think Jeremy Colleton is a long-term fit behind the bench? And if not, how long before he's in the hot seat?
I kind of keep saying this on Blackhawks Banter. Colleton's one that I don't love, but I don't hate either. He's kind of just, he was put into a tough position taking over for Quenneville, and to be honest, he does a lot of things well, but he also makes a lot of mistakes, which is that's expected as a new coach. So I don't see him as a long-term fit, and that's not really a knock on him. It's just more about when you're getting competitive, you need a coach that, you know, knows what the stakes are and knows how to handle that kind of thing. So he's a good coach, I think, for now, because we're obviously kind of in limbo, and obviously I think having Quenneville here wouldn't have helped because he wasn't able to do much with the roster either, and it wasn't his fault. So maybe I think next year is going to be really big for him. If he still can't get this team to produce in some way, then I think he'll probably be on the hot seat.
You know, he's really, really smart, and he's good with the young players. And of course, when you're rebuilding, you've got a lot of young players. So it seems like that would be a good fit. But he's young too, you know, and you get frustrated when it seems like he makes stupid decisions, or when sometimes he's stubborn. You know, there's back and forth with, he's got his man and a half defensive zone versus zone defense. But that being said, you know, he's young, he's learning as he goes. And, you know, here's the thing, he's general manager Stan Bowman's guy. Like, that was his pick, right? So depending upon what happens with this whole situation, and if Bowman is no longer with the team, and who knows, you know, this is all speculation, and the whole investigation has to go underway, and we'll kind of see how this all pans out. But if that's the case, if Bowman's no longer here, I think the Collins is on the hot seat right away.
So we're going to switch back to the goaltending. Do you ladies think, like, what needs to if they don't get a new goalie, if you have the two you have, are there any changes, improvements those two need to make, or is it not necessarily all on them?
It's not on the goaltending, I don't think. And that's what makes it so frustrating. We had a young and inexperienced goaltending tandem, but it wasn't their fault. And they were kind of expected to put a lot of that weight on them. I mean, Crawford and Leonard face like 50 shots a night, and that's even tough for any goalie. And so it's not them. And like someone said kind of towards the end of the season, it kind of made me open my eyes that, like, okay, if Colin Delia lets in 5 goals but plays an outstanding game, that kind of tells you that that's not him. It's the players in front of him, and it's been that way for a few years now. So defense has to improve. Team defense has to improve.
It will be interesting to see what happens there. I think that, you know, Lakinen's going to come in being the guy, but we really don't know. You know, what are they expecting? What are they going to do with Colin Delia? He did not play. Gosh, how many games did he play, Brooke? I mean, he played a couple games at the beginning.
He only played like 4, I think.
Yeah. And then they kind of threw him a bone and let him play a couple games at the end of the season, and it was his prove it. And he played phenomenal. He did really well, which just goes to show you, wow, you know, could they be the tandem, you know, next season? Could it be Lankinen and Delia? And they'll be okay. It's such an unknown because they're both so new that it's just tough to, it's tough for me to trust in that. But that could be where we're at.
Yeah.
And who is the most surprising player this past season?
So I kind of was thinking about this, and there's a lot of surprises, I guess, rookie-wise. So I kind of want to take this into more of a veteran presence, and I'm going to say Vinny Hinostroza. He only played a little bit towards the end because he was acquired towards the deadline, but he was on a really good streak.
Yeah, he was.
He was here, and he produced, I think, even at a higher rate than he did the last time he was here. So that's someone that really surprised me. I didn't expect him to be like, I kind of expected it to be just what he was, which is a good complementary player, but he ended up producing really well.
He's an unrestricted free agent, though. I don't know if they're going to be able to make it work. I
don't know either.
Vinny's going to be around, but maybe we'll see. He loves to be he's from Chicago, so. But anyway, okay. So can I talk about my most improved or my pick that I liked?
Absolutely.
I thought that you were gonna, Brooke. I really thought you were gonna say Brandon Hagel, so I'm gonna say Brandon Hagel. Rookie forward. kind of reminds you of Andrew Shaw in that he just comes in with energy and tenacity, worked his butt off every shift. He, had the respect of the players and the fans. Okay, what did he have? 9 goals and 24 points. Priority to re-sign him. He's a free agent as well. And I also would like to touch on defenseman Wyatt Kalynuk, and I don't even know if I'm saying it right. Ian Mitchell and Nicholas Bodine are the ones, you guys, the defensive prospects that everybody was talking about, and everybody's like, who's Wyatt Kalynuk? And he did have to wait his turn, and he didn't come in until like the end of March and really get in, but then he stayed on the roster for the rest of the season. Yeah. And he's a solid defenseman. He showed he can be solid in the defense zone, and he can also step into the play and like make some offense happen. So I think he's a keeper that nobody even realized. He kind of fell under the radar.
Yeah, he did.
And on the flip side, who was the most disappointing?
I think me and Gail are really going to agree on this. So I'm sorry if we're repeating ourselves, but Dylan Strome for sure. Sorry, Gail. Yeah, I don't think there's really much more to say about that. I mean, he signed a big deal. He held out for that big deal and then didn't perform. And that really kind of irked me a lot. I don't take that very lightly.
Okay.
I was most disappointed with Dylan Strome as well. He had his chance to shine because Taves was out last season and Kirby was out. At least he came back. But at the beginning of the season, they were both out. Your 1 and 2 centers are out. And Strome has his chance to shine and step up, and he really didn't. And he went from, supposedly being the number 1 guy to playing on the wing and getting scratched at the end of the season. And granted, to his defense, I don't think that Coach Colleton really utilized him correctly. So I think that there is a little bit more potential there. A lot of people say, he's going to get traded and he's not a fit with the Blackhawks anymore. I don't see him being traded because let's face it, after this down year that he had, I don't think he's real marketable out there. He gets paid $3 million. And I just don't think that anybody's going to be real interested in him. So we'll see. He had a down season. Maybe he'll bounce back and redeem himself this season.
I guess to wrap up the show, we have to touch a little bit on what's coming up in the next few weeks. But we talked about Dougie Hamilton, Seth Jones. But what would you girls like to see? What moves would you like? What positions would you like them to address? Weaknesses, strengths. So what would your priorities be this offseason for the Hawks?
I always said center depth, but now that because especially with not knowing where Taves was going to be at, but I still think even when he comes back, that should be a priority because just what they have now is just not going to cut it. But now hearing about Duncan Keith going, I think defense needs to be a priority. Really, goaltending needs to be a priority. Really, everything needs to be a priority. I'll take anything at this point.
Girl after my own heart, man.
I'm going to completely agree. I think that the Blackhawks need to focus on getting themselves a number 1 defenseman. Dougie Hamilton, please.
Yes.
Over Seth Jones. We talked about Matt Dumba last week on Blackhawks Banter. You know what? They probably need maybe a couple defensemen right now. Number 1 guy and like maybe a veteran guy to complement the.
I can give you guys Severson.
You can have Dumba.
We can just start trading right now.
Let's do it. We'll figure it all out.
Yeah, exactly. If they have us as general managers, good Lord, we'd have these things figured out.
Well, that's a great way to end the show, actually, on that note. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have for this week. Gail, Brooke, as Gail said, it was nice to actually speak to Gail and Brooke in person on screen because normally I'm behind the scenes on Blackhawks Banter. So thank you so much for joining us this week. We had a great time.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah.
Sure.
Fun crossover.
Fun crossover. Fun show crossover. And thank you, as always, to Hannah, Mariah, and Kristy for joining me. We'll be back next week. And of course, a special thank you to all of you for watching and listening. Be sure to check out all the great shows produced by the Hockey Writers, just like Blackhawks Banter, on YouTube, Facebook, and your favorite podcast platform. And all of our shows are now available on iHeartRadio as well. And don't forget to visit thehockeywriters.com to read all of the great content being published daily by our writers, including all 6 of us. Follow us on social media so you're not missing anything. Last but not least, sign up for our daily morning newsletter called Morning Skate by visiting morningskate.io to start your day off right with the latest hockey news. Yes, exactly. See, we have a
It's a good one.
so you must sign up, please do. So take care and see you next week, everyone.